France 24's Philip Turle has been keeping a close eye on this. He joins me now on the set to talk a bit more about all of this. So, Philip, first of all, just bring us up to date on the situation so far.
Well, I think the figures are what everyone is looking at. The unions, the 8 united unions in all of this, will be looking to see how many people are going to turn out on the streets for the protests like the ones behind me from last time round. The government will be looking at the figures to see if there are fewer people in the streets today, which is probably going to be the case. But it's only a false victory for the government because there is another day of strikes on the 7th of March, and that is when the unions want everybody out because there will start to be rolling strikes in France. So let's have a look at what this is all about. The first thing is, why are people striking in France? It's over this pension deal. The government wants to increase the retirement age, as you were saying, from 62 to 64 by 2030. That's a no-go issue for the opposition and for the unions. They want a 43-year contribution period from 2027. That's also a no-go issue for quite a lot of union officials and the opposition. But the government says if they do push through that reform, it will have two effects. One, to raise 17.7 billion euros by 2030, and secondly, to assure the future of the pension system in France. Now, French people are pretty much against this pension reform. If you look at the opinion polls, are you against the reform? Yes, 55%. That's down 5%. And are you in favour of the protests? That's another victory. 66% say they are. That's down 6% as well. So fewer people in favour and also in favour of the protests. But it's still more against the reform than those who think the reform should go through Parliament. So there are problems that the government are facing. And this has led to some extremely raucous and difficult discussions in the National Assembly, where all the articles in the bill are being discussed at the moment. There are thousands of amendments that have been put forward by the opposition, which are stalling the debate on the bill itself. And it's led to insults. And the most marked insult this week was one by a man called Aurélien Santos, who's an MP for the France Unbowed Far Left Party, who accused the Labour minister of being responsible for the choices which led to people dying more at work because they had to work longer hours, calling him an imposter and an assassin. That led to an interruption of the discussions in the National Assembly. The bottom line here, Jeannie, is that if this Article 7 on the increase in the retirement age gets through Parliament, that is going to be a victory for the opposition. If it doesn't get through Parliament, then that will be a victory for the government. If it doesn't get through Parliament, it will then be seriously difficult for the opposition to push through more protests afterwards. So a lot of debates over this Article 7, over raising the retirement age to 64. All of it's got to be finished by tomorrow at midnight.
Right. So what's the situation? Does the government have the support to push it through?
No, it doesn't. And that is the big problem for Emmanuel Macron and Elisabeth Borne, the Prime Minister. If you look at the figures and the parties, there is the Renaissance movement, which is the ruling party of Emmanuel Macron, has a few allies. They're in favour. The Républicains, which is the right-wing party of former President Nicolas Sarkozy, they're mostly in favour, not all of them. The National Rally of Marine Le Pen is against, as is the NUPES, which is an umbrella group of the left, bringing together the ecologists, the socialists and the far-left France Unbowed. So if you put all those figures together, you need 289. That is the magic figure of votes that are needed to push this through. The Renaissance and its allies have 250, so that's not enough to get the bill through Parliament. The Républicains have 62. If they all vote in favour of the bill, many of them said they will, then there will be 312 in favour, which means the majority of 23, so the bill will pass. The problem is that many of the Républicains, between 15 and 20, maybe more, are hesitant about voting in favour of this bill. It will be a razor-thin majority for the government, or they might not get a majority at all. That is why these debates are so heated in the National Assembly.
Philip, just very briefly, both the French President Macron and the Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne seem to be staking their reputation on getting this adopted. Why is it so important to them?
So Emmanuel Macron, who was re-elected last year, doesn't have an overall majority in Parliament. He staked his reputation on getting this bill through. It was part of his election manifesto. If it doesn't get through, it will really make him into a lame duck president, unable to push his legislation through Parliament. What will that mean for future legislation? That's the big question that everybody is asking if it doesn't get through Parliament. As for the Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, that will also be a serious fall from grace for her not to get this legislation through Parliament as well. So all of it is hinging on this pension reform. What we're really seeing here is a standoff between the opposition and the unions on one side and Emmanuel Macron and the Renaissance movement on the other. And for the moment, we don't know who is going to win.
All right. Well, thank you for staying on top of it for us. That's France 24's Philip Turle.